Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me to learn a little bit more about using novels and verse with teens. I'm Lisa Krok and I'm a former teacher turned librarian, and I'm currently a library manager in the greater Cleveland area. My book, Novels and Verse for Teens, released right at the beginning of the pandemic. So there's a pretty good chance you might have missed it due to that timing. So that's why I wanted to share a little bit about it with you today. This is released from ABC Clio, Libraries Unlimited in print. I wrote this book for teachers and librarians as a professional guide to aid them in reaching all teens, and especially marginalized teens and reluctant or striving readers, to help them connect with verse novels. During my 2 years that I served on YALSA's Quick Pick for Reluctant Readers Committee, I found that one of the biggest reasons teens may be reluctant or striving readers is because they've not yet found books that reflect their life experiences. I used Rudine Sims Bishop's Windows, Mirrors, and Sliding Glass Doors from her 1990 essay as my personal guideline. I researched throughout the year to find books that feature teens from different backgrounds and interests that they could identify with. Whether by demographics such as race, religion, or culture, identifying as LGBTQ+, living with mental illness, being in foster care, liking sports, sexual assault survivors, performing arts aficionados, and varying abilities. All readers deserve to see themselves reflected in books. The verse novels suggested in this book were those I had access to prior to turning in my manuscript. Most are recent, within the last couple of years, along with a few that encapsulated themes or representation that was valuable that might be a little bit older. I made every effort to include own voices authors whenever possible. There is a verse novel desert of sorts in certain representations. I would say while I was researching for this book, I found that a Native, Indigenous, Muslim, transgender, and non-binary representation in particular had little to no own voices representation in verse novels. This means, good news, there's a wide opportunity for authors and publishers to create novels in verse for these communities in particular. Author Eric Gansworth, who is an enrolled member of the Onondaga Nation, he does have a memoir in verse forthcoming entitled Apple, Skin to the Core, and that's coming out this fall. Another big reason that novels in verse work well for striving or reluctant readers is due to the physicality of the book. With more white space, fewer words per page, and font that can vary in style, size, and format, they can be more appealing to teens who might be intimidated by too many words per page. Teens who previously wouldn't even think of reading an inch-thick book discover they can read bigger books. This, in turn, helps build confidence and increases their motivation to read even more. An example of this is Kwame Alexander's Rebound. If you take a look here, you'll see it's a good inch or more thick, that book. However, when you look inside, you can see plenty of white space on that page, and you can see a lot of font that is varying in size and shape and the way it's laid out on the page. Clearly not as much of the white space taken up by the print itself, and that is appealing to reluctant readers. Okay, another important feature of novels in verse is voice. Generally, verse novels present a first-person narrative which invites the reader into the life of the protagonist. This can lend itself to addressing difficult topics that may be deep or emotionally intense. The white space on the pages of novels in verse can be thought of as a silence to be filled in by the reader's imagination. A favorite quote of mine, which I included in my book, is from former poet laureate Rita Dove. Verse novels offer the weight of each word, the weight of the sentence, the weight of the line, the weight of white space, heightened attention to sound, and a deep allegiance to silence. deep allegiance to silence. Just take that in for a moment. I'm going to share with you an example of voice in a novel in verse. This is from Ordinary Hazards by Nikki Grimes. And I'm going to read you an excerpt that I think sums up voice pretty well. This is called Pineapple Surprise. After my grandmother discovered my fondness for pineapples, this sweet knowledge became a weapon she wielded whenever she needed to express her love and regret. She'd go to considerable trouble to bake a pineapple upside-down cake from scratch, just for me, and then would gleefully watch as I set aside my adolescent aloofness long enough to devour several honey-soaked slices, like someone starving. Sharing was not required, unless I so chose. Those sticky cakes never quite made up for Grandma's lack of physical affection, but my belly happily accepted the substitute. Can't you just feel that stickiness on your fingers? Can't you feel the angst in her heart from not getting that love from her grandma? And don't you really want a piece of that pineapple cake right now? That's voice. Novels in verse also provide counter stories to singular narratives that are often told by books that are considered to be classics or canon. Scholars Sandra Hughes Hassel, Dr. Kim Parker, and teacher Tricia Ibarvia are all cited in my book for their work on the value of avoiding the single narrative through counter stories. Counter stories can help fight bias and hate by seeing and valuing teens who might otherwise feel erased by the dominant culture. Counter stories can also help build empathy by seeing another side of the story and not just stereotypes. I recommend viewing Adichie's TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. I do have a QR code listed in the book where you can just scan it with your phone and it'll pop the video right up for you. An example of a counter story within a novel in verse is in Saving Red by Sonia Sonis. The protagonist, Molly, is searching the streets for homeless people for a school assignment. One girl, who she calls Red, stands out to her. Molly quickly realizes that Red appears to be mentally ill and that there's a lot more to her story than homelessness alone. This is a terrific springboard to discussions about mental health with teens. So what is in the book? I've created a layout in a way that I think is most useful for teachers and librarians. The first section is research-based information about why and how novels in verse can be used to reach all teens, especially those in marginalized communities and those who may be reluctant and striving readers. Part 2 is a large reader's advisory section featuring 53 verse novels. Each book listed includes the following: a cover image where we could get permissions, bibliographic information, grade level advisories, content tags, a brief summary, and poetry activities for teens to further engage them with the literature. Each book has at least one activity. Some of them have multiple activities. Each activity is accompanied by curriculum connections, meaning the Common Core state standards and the AASL standards, to make lesson planning easier for teachers and librarians. A wide variety of poetry activities are presented throughout the book, with an exercise correlating somehow to the featured novel in verse. A glossary of poetic devices and the standard author title index are provided. My favorite part of the book that I think is really special is the content tag index. I don't know if you can see that very well there. The content tag index took all of the content tags from each individual book that I had created and alphabetized them, telling you, whatever the tag is. Like, for example, in the A's, there's abolitionist, abortion, accidents, addiction, adoption, and so on. And it goes down to asthma, astronomy. They are alphabetized by content tag, title, or subject, and also gives you a listing of the book and author and page number. So if a teen comes to you and this kid's really into astronomy. Oh, great. Well, I can look that up and I can see that Lita Judge, Mary's Monster, might be a good fit for this kid. So that's just an alternate way to look through and find good fits to pair with the kids. Just again, a way to enable librarians and teachers to quickly find the books to pair with the experiences and interests of particular students. I do not claim to be an expert writer. I do not claim to be a great poet. My skills lie in pairing books with readers and then connecting poetry activities to them in an engaging and meaningful way. I'm going to show you some more examples from that now. One book that was really fun to pair was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book obviously features a girl that is into slam poetry, much like the author herself is. So slam poetry was an obvious go-to for an activity for this. I also included a contrapuntal poetry activity. If you listen to the audiobook of Acevedo reading The Poet X, she talks about at the end how her last poem was a contrapuntal poem. So I took a little time to learn about that and put a little activity in to go with The Poet X that had to do with that. There's also a QR code on that page that links to a video of Acevedo reciting a poetry slam called Hair. That's pretty fantastic. Another one that I enjoyed pairing up was Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. I've read an article where Jacqueline Woodson referred to this book as, quote, an ode to family. So naturally, ode writing is the poetry activity. See how this just comes together like that? Shout by Lori Halls Anderson. Stand up and shout with an acrostic poetry activity. It's right there for you, S-H-O-U-T, acrostic poetry. So that one was an easy one too. Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. Since the entire book takes place over the course of 60 seconds in the elevator, I used a poetry activity to write short verses that are timed for 60 seconds each. This repeats 7 times, one for each floor in the elevator as well as going down. So you end up with 7 short verses that are timed 60 seconds each to coordinate with the book. Another one that I kind of invented myself was to go with What I Leave Behind. Allison McGee wrote this book. It has 100 sections of 100-word verses. In the book, the main character frequents a dollar store where he buys gifts for people and has a relationship with the store owner. So I used the 100 pennies, get it, $1, as the vision for writing the poems of exactly 100 words. No change given. So basically, many of the poetry activities were forms that already existed, but I wanted to get creative and invent some fun ones that tied into the books. After all, Jericho Brown invented the duplex form, and now he's a Pulitzer Prize winner, so use your imagination while writing. The information presented in this video, along with much more, is included in Novels in Verse for Teens. My reviews and endorsements are provided at the end for your convenience. School Library Journal and Voya both gave me recommended reviews for this book. Additionally, I have endorsements from authors Nikki Grimes, Margarita Engel, Padma Venkatraman, and Sylvia Vardell. So if you'd like to take a look at those, they'll be at the end. Please reach out to me with any questions you might have. I have provided my contact information and also buy links for an indie bookseller, Barnes & Nobles, and Amazon, so you have choices there. All right, thank you so much and happy writing.